How's it going, ladies and bruises? I'm Bobby Sixkilla and welcome back to Choices That Matter. It's story time again, and we are... It just keeps getting weird. Looks like the whole world is taken over by the 100th Day cult now. We're currently still in Italy, I believe, and Victor Santiago has called a big meeting, and he's about to kill someone, a lady. And my throat is quite sore, so I've got a throat lozenge at the moment, but hopefully that won't be annoying. We're going to call the mafia to try and stop him from killing the woman, because I feel like the police has probably already been infiltrated. I've sent a message and a video to Miss Domina's emoticon device. Her reply came up on Moti's screen almost instantly. Under the circumstances, we'll give you a discount rate for his capture. 1 million euros. I hesitated, knowing I was dealing with an organization that could easily rise up to take Santiago's place. Also, I wasn't sure my discretionary funds stretched that far. Teacher, do I tell her yes, or say that you need time to make arrangements? Tell her yes, and pay her immediately. Yes, teacher. I tapped on Moti's screen to indicate that I understood. The money and even the mafia wouldn't be enough. There was a woman on stage about to die, and no one was close enough to save her. I wasn't close enough, but Moti was. Moti, I whispered, can you hack those big screens and write a message? Of course, teacher. Do it now. Write the message, Santiago, stop now, or we will end you. Translate it too. Hacking the screens now, teacher. My message appeared one letter at a time on the screens, in seconds. It was all there in English, Italian, and Spanish. Santiago, stop now, or we will end you. The screens didn't show Santiago's image anymore, but I was close enough to the stage to see the fury on his face as he read my ultimatum. For a moment I thought it might work, or at least buy me some time. Then Santiago shot his victim. Her sobbing stopped at once, leaving total silence. Santiago raised his arms in triumph, just as my message vanished from all the screens and his image returned. It seemed he had his own hackers on standby. We are victorious, he cried. There was tiny hesitation in the crowd, as the crowd absorbed the fact they just witnessed a murder. The woman lay at Santiago's feet like a discarded doll. She was no one and nothing. We didn't even know her name. The mob erupted in cheers. The sun, they chanted, the sun, the sun. Santiago lowered his arms. Bowing like a conjurer, the crowd hushed once more. I heard Sharon's unmistakable Australian voice as she shouted, where's the sun? Hey Santiago, wasn't the sun coming back today? At the noise, I quickly turned and spotted her at once, just as two men dragged her toward the stage. One of them clapped a black gloved hand over her mouth. All three slipped under the black fabric draping of the stage and effectively vanished. There is unbelief here, Santiago thundered. I feel it poisoning the air and holding back the light. The crowd burst into murmuring and people started looking from side to side, searching for a guilty party. I suddenly wished I'd thought to buy yellow contact lenses for myself. For a moment I thought Santiago would simply stand by and watch his mob evolve into a full-blown riot. Then he spoke again. Return to your homes and be at peace. I will select a small group of the most faithful and travel across the sea to make a greater, purer sacrifice. Our son shall return by this time tomorrow. He made a flourish in the air and his spotlight turned off. A few moments later his light turned back on, and with a wider, softer focus, Santiago and the dead woman were gone. The crowd blinked and moved slowly, as if coming out of a dream. One by one, people began to leave the plaza. I didn't see any sign of Sharon. We gotta find Sharon. Let's join the most faithful, then we can maybe find Sharon. I didn't even need to think about what Sharon would do. She'd get herself on that boat one way or another, probably as a prisoner. I moved forward, as most of the crowd drifted away. A few remained, some of them weeping in religious ecstasy. The others standing gravely in total silence, like automatons waiting for their next order. I moved closer to the stage before adopting my own submissive pose and hoping it was enough. Moti, I'm going to close my eyes. It will hide my eye colour as well, as make me look more trusting. I need you to be my eyes. If Santiago himself approaches me, or someone looks likely to harm me, please alert me silently. Yes, teacher, I'll keep you safe. I closed my eyes and bowed my head, hoping that if Santiago was still around, he wouldn't be able to see my face. Long moments passed in the darkness and I heard soft conversations here and there around the plaza. I hoped my suspicion was correct and that Santiago had assigned people to choose his most faithful for him. I needed to stay out of his way on the boat, then hopefully I could get Sharon and get out. "Ciao," said someone. Someone said right in front of me. I opened my eyes to a black-clad guard with yellow eyes. He looked incredibly young, and I wondered if he was missing school to join Santiago's cult. "Hello," I said. "Do you speak English?" "A little," he said, with a dimpled smile. "Are you faithful?" "Oh yes," I said, and added humbly, "At least I hope so." "Come with me," he said, "and you'll see our great leader bring back the sun." I looked for Sharon as a few more people were gathered and loaded into a series of buses. Wherever she wasn't in the crowd like I was. I had a bad feeling she was travelling with Santiago. Our buses drove into the harbour and let us all out, where we filed obediently into a ferry that was still decorated with advertising for moonlit tours. No one even asked to go home and get their things. No one asked for food or water. No one spoke above a hushed murmur. I desperately hoped this wasn't the last voyage I'd ever take, and I hoped I hadn't just left Sharon behind. Search for Sharon. It was eerie, motoring through the busy harbour with no sun to sparkle on the waves or warm the chilly wind. After a few moments, most of the faithful gave up on the promenade deck and went inside. I took a slow walk all around the deck, asking Moti to take measurements and finding places where a prisoner could be hidden. "Teacher, do you hear that tapping?" I stopped dead and listened, and once I'd schooled my breathing and sorted out the sounds of confused seagulls and low chatter, I heard it too. 3 taps, then a pause. Then another 3 taps. "Moti, I hear it. Do you think it's Morse code?" "Good idea, teacher. 3 short taps is the letter S." "Oh," I said, "is she signaling an SOS call?" "No, teacher, just the letter S over and over again." "That's Sharon, alright," I said, "and I suppose she means she's unhurt. That is a plausible theory." "Of course, we're not talking about Shazza here," I muttered. Her definition of unhurt might not be the same as the rest of the world. Based on the tapping and the hasty repurposing of the vessel, Miss Sharon is likely to be in the storage area, behind the bar. I said. I see why she doesn't feel the need for a hasty rescue." I stopped for a moment and blinked. Something was strange. "Moti, how do you know so much about this ferry?" I asked, even though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. "I hacked into the ferry's wireless network, teacher. It's not very secure. Unlike the bar storage door, which has the steadiest lock on board." I nodded. "I see. How do we get there without being seen? If she's tapping loud enough for us to hear her, it's unlikely she's under guard." Moti directed me downwards, and then upwards, and I soon found the unattended bar. A few patient individuals had found the bar before me, and were waiting with stoic determination at the tiny round tables. They looked up at me hopefully when I came in. "Hello," I said smoothly. "Yes, I'm the bartender, but I'm afraid we've misplaced the key to storage. This may take a minute." 7125. I spotted the keypad a moment later and pushed the buttons, thanking my lucky stars that Moti was now an accomplished hacker with no qualms of breaking the law. Someday, I need to cut my way back on the illegal activities, for both of us. Sharon sat cross-legged on the floor, still banging on the metal wall. "Oh," she said. "Hi." There was an unconscious man about 3 feet from Sharon. He was bound with zip ties and was gagged with a scarf. Noticing who I was looking at, Sharon laughed. "Don't worry about him," she explained cheerily. "He was my guard, so I knocked him out," which was unfortunate since I didn't have the passcode to open the door. I glanced at the keypad she was gesturing at. The door was locked from the inside too. "Bartender," called one of the patrons behind me. Breaking free of my stupor, I cleared my throat. "Stop dawdling," I said loudly, stepping a little to the left to block the view of the unconscious man. "These people are waiting for drinks." Sharon immediately picked up on what I was doing. Springing to her feet, she laughed and pushed past me to the bar. "It sure looks past 5 o'clock out there, doesn't it?" Someone laughed nervously. "Sea breeze, anyone?" she asked the patrons. "Whiskey? Or would you like one of my signature cocktails?" While we putter over to delightful Malta for our impromptu holiday. Somehow it didn't surprise me at all that Sharon had experienced bartending. I just wish we would have some drinks ourselves. When the group was well satisfied, she found an honesty jar and left it beside the register before she took me by the arm to get some privacy. "Thanks for opening the door," she said cheerfully. "We have almost reached Malta." "Better get a wriggle on then," said Sharon. "Where'd they put Jonathan?" "Do you think he could be on board?" I asked. "I'm sure of it," she said. He was under the stage in the plaza. Santiago's on board, and so is he. Santiago will kill him for sure, I said. Not if we find him first, said Sharon. Alright, let's find Jonathan. Let's go lower, said Sharon. That's traditional for prisoners on ships, isn't it? That and castles, I said. And we headed to the closest stairwell we could find. I jumped at the sound of a crackly message over the ferry's intercom. We are now drawing close to the island of Malta. Prepare to leave the vessel. You will be led to your accommodation for this evening. I realised we've been sailing at high speed for more than 12 hours. Accommodation, said Sharon. So he's already got friends there. And enemies, I said grimly. This madness can't go on forever. Sharon glanced reflexively at a nearby porthole. We could really use some sunshine about now. Santiago wouldn't have much power then, I agreed. Speaking of which, I said, thinking aloud, Santiago knows that if the sun comes back at the wrong moment, his murdering spree is over. He'll stay on the boat, said Sharon, picking up on my logic, where he knows he can get away. I bet he keeps Jonathan on board too, I said. So do we stow away and make sure that he's not as safe as he thinks he is, or do we get on land and see what havoc we can wreak while he's asleep? I'm staying, said Sharon. This is where the fun will be. I'm not going anywhere without you. If anything happens, she said, let's meet in Portugal. I agreed, pleased that she was finally admitting that it was good to have a backup plan. We soon realised someone was checking the ferry to round up any stragglers, and Sharon had the brilliant or possibly stupid idea that I should lock her back in the storage room of the bar in case someone checked on her. I agreed, and we hid the guard she'd knocked out earlier inside the liquor cabinet in the back room. Once we were certain the man wasn't able to make any noise, I locked the back room door with Sharon behind it and hid beneath a lifeboat on deck myself. For once I was grateful for the dark. It kept me safe, while Santiago's hand-picked guards patrolled the deck. I waited until midnight before meeting up with Sharon in the deserted bar. She yawned at me pointedly and said, I thought you'd wandered off. Together, Sharon, Moti and I searched the ferry from the bottom to the top, avoiding guards and snatching a little food here and there. At last I heard voices talking quietly, two men speaking in Spanish, and grabbed Sharon's arm. That's them. I could hear Victor and Jonathan's voices behind the closed door. Before we could do anything, however, one of them suddenly stormed out of that room via a different door. I suspected it was Victor. I don't know how, but I can feel you through that door, Jonathan suddenly said, just as we were about to creak open that door. You should leave. I can't go with you yet. I need to keep trying with Santiago. Sharon and I shared a look. How did Jonathan know we were here? Victor chose that moment to re-enter the room Jonathan was in, and they started talking again. She listened for a few moments. They're arguing, she said. Jonathan is begging him to stop what he's doing. Is there anyone else in there, I asked. She shook her head. No one else is talking, but that doesn't mean much. Let's keep listening. You listen, she said. I don't like pointless jibber-jabber. Before I could stop her, she hurled herself through the narrow door, and suddenly Santiago was yelling in Italian. There are more people inside. I tapped on Moti's screen to let Moti know I understood. Let go of me, Sharon shouted. Look at all you 5 men with guns against 1 woman. She was sending me a message, and I listened, tucking myself under a life preserver that had its own indented compartment in the wall. I shut my eyes and listened with my whole body, terrified I'd hear gunshots as Santiago killed one of the few people I actually cared about in the world. Instead, I heard the door creak back open, and I silently counted as the guards came out and left. 1, 2, 3. If they all left, the odds of Sharon and I and Jonathan getting free had suddenly improved. 4. 2 strong hands gripped my arms from behind and hauled me onto the floor. 'Fight like fury. I punched a bit and kicked, and the hands holding me let go. I heard a flurry of Italian that sounded like swearing, and I sprinted for the open air. The freezing air hit me like a slap in the face, and even as I ran for my life, I noticed the bitter edge to the breeze. Behind me, I heard more voices shouting and running feet. I knew exactly how to make them lose enthusiasm for the chase. I ran into the water, hauling in deep breaths of air that scraped my chest, and I jumped into the sea. For a moment, I thought I'd been shot. It was just the water. I swam until I judged I was too far away to be shot, and then I turned back. No one else is in the water. I swam a little way around the island, needing to avoid the people. Once again, the darkness kept me from being discovered. Moti was desperately trying to get me in an argument about politics, but I quickly realized Moti was just trying to keep me talking in order to monitor my health. Then we argued about whether I deserved to have a motorcon, or if I was simply creating an amoral supercomputer with no empathy and no limits. I had a bad feeling Moti was wondering about the same deep questions for a long time, and worse, that Moti was right to worry. But I was so tired. I reached the shore, stole some dry clothes from someone's house. Moti told me to. It wasn't my idea. Brought a pair of golden contact lenses and booked into a new hotel, where I had a steaming hot shower, cranked the heating, and then drank scalding hot tea until I finally stopped shivering. I didn't want to go outside ever again, and Sharon was still on Santiago's boat. I crawled under the covers with one more mug of tea, trying to think of a plan. When the chanting in the street started, I woke up. It was morning, and I was still wearing my shoes. It was time. I grabbed my things and ran down to join the mob, terrified that Sharon would be appearing on stage to be publicly killed. The crowd carried me back to the seashore, where Santiago stood and waved to the crowd from the upper deck of his ferry. The shore was lined with more of those revolting giant screens, all showing grossly oversized copies of Santiago's face. "Today is the day," he screamed, and his wailing was amplified until it rang in my head like oversized bells. "Today I sacrificed my spiritual father." I had a very bad feeling I knew where this was going. In my heart of hearts, I was relieved. Either he didn't have Sharon, or he was saving her for another day. "Today, together, we bring back the sun." Little puffs of his breath showed white against the black curtain someone had erected behind him. He spread his arms wide. "I am Victor, and we are victorious." The crowd screamed in delight, and I knew I was a coward for being glad no one was looking at me. The curtain parted, and Jonathan stumbled out on stage, almost falling to his knees at Santiago's feet. "Behold," cried Santiago, "my teacher, my leader, my sacrifice, the founding father of the 100th day." Blood trickled down Jonathan's face. Even from this distance, I could see that he'd been beaten, and he was shaking like a leaf. He was terrified. He knew he was going to die. He stood and took 3 steps forwards. It was clear he barely had the strength to stand. One of the guards lunged for him, but Santiago waved them away. Jonathan grasped the microphone with both hands, and the crowd hushed. "I am not worthy," he said to the crowd. Santiago smiled. Jonathan blinked as his blood dripped into his eyes. His voice shook. "I'm not worthy." Santiago scowled and moved to cut him off. "Please don't listen to him. This is not a sacrifice," Jonathan said, speaking quickly and pulling the microphone stand with him across the deck. "This is wrong. You know this is wrong." Jonathan continued addressing the crowd. "No one is being saved. The sun will not return by murdering people. Open your eyes, I beg you." 1 or 2 people in the crowd shifted their feet, suddenly unsure about their grand purpose. No one moved closer to the freezing water. For the first time since I'd met Jonathan, I could actually see him as a charismatic cult leader. He was always so meek and afraid that I found it hard to imagine him as a leader of any kind. "Please," Jonathan screamed, "listen to me. The sun will return, but not today, not like this, not with murder. There is hope, I promise you, but this is..." In one fast movement, Victor drew a gun and shot him in the head. He slumped over his microphone, permanently silenced. And far away, he looked like a drunk or an exhausted child sleeping awkwardly and publicly without needing a mattress or dignity. The stand propped him up, as if he could simply open his eyes and be alive once more. But on the giant screens, it was clear that the dark hood of his jacket hung loose. Half his head was gone. Jonathan was dead. The delicate balance of corpse and stand shifted as the ferry moved with the sea, and Jonathan fell forwards, landing prostrate on the giant stage. The crowd sighed softly, like the last mourner at a new grave when the funeral was finished long ago. Sadness, yes, but resignation. A few flakes of snow fell, like Holocaust ash. People looked at the sky, watching it fall. A child laughed delightedly. She'd probably never seen snow before. "Teacher, it has never snowed on Malta before." "I know, Moti," I said, and I shivered inside my stolen clothes. The snow fell harder, blowing in freezing flurries and speckling Jonathan's dark coat. The sun did not come back. For a moment I thought I saw fear on Victor Santiago's face. He bent and dragged the microphone out from under Jonathan's body. The cord was tangled around his arm, and it took him a long time. "Who dared to disbelieve?" he thundered. "Your faith has been tested and found wanting. There must be a greater sacrifice because of your disbelief." A murmur of horror washed across the crowd. Snow dusted Santiago's black hair. "Tell me you recorded that," I said through gritted teeth. "Yes, teacher. Shall I send it to the news networks?" "No, Moti," I said. More attention will only help Santiago now. Then what shall I do? Where's Domina right now, I asked. Miss Domina is here on Malta. Correction, she is on the ferry, currently owned by Mr. Santiago. Call her, I said. Putting you through now, teacher. Domina's calm voice greeted me. Have you found Sharon, I asked. Your blonde friend managed to send us the coordinates of Santiago's mobile base, she said. Is she safe, I asked. Did you let her out? Ah, said Domina. It seems you have conflicting priorities. Do you want Santiago taken out of the picture tonight before he kills again, or do you want Sharon freed? You're right there, I shouted, forgetting where I was. Can't you do both? Not with our current resources. We can only do one thing tonight. Also, it'll cost you another €1,000,000. Another million? I trembled with rage. Sharon freed you from that shipping container, as you know perfectly well. The company would never approve €1,000,000 for Sharon. If I wanted to make a new deal with Domina, I'd either have to steal from the company or lie to the Mafia. Both would be a bad idea. Sorry, she said idly. That just won't do. I believe you're aware that the Mafia isn't a charity. So which is it? Should we get Santiago tonight as per our original agreement, or free Sharon tonight for the extra €1,000,000? Focus on Santiago, deal with him, and then we can release Sharon, can't we? Very well, said Domina. It was a pleasure doing business with you. I was unable to be civil, so I hung up. What have you done? I'm ceasing communications with you until further notice. That's fair, I whispered, staggering through the crowd to lean against a stone wall for support. My guts twisted, and I dug my fingers into the stone in helpless frustration. Had I just sentenced Sharon to death? Surely not. As long as they stop him now, we don't need to save her. She can get out. Alright. We've got to deal with Santiago first. Once he's dealt with, no one's in danger anymore. Santiago lifted Jonathan's body and tossed it overboard. A long time ago, Jonathan had been the leader of the 100th Day Cult, a name based on his prediction of the second sun outage. An even longer time ago, he had been an ordinary man in an ordinary office, crunching numbers. His body barely even made a splash. The crowd dispersed quickly this time, unconsciously sensing that being close to Santiago meant being close to death. Santiago and his cult disappeared inside the ferry, leaving a pair of armed men standing guard on deck. Sharon, Victor, and the Mafia were all in that ferry. I was the only one on the outside. Waiting was my only option, I realized. Until an opportunity presented itself, I had no choice but to watch the ferry from the docks. Eventually the guards would have to change shifts and I could sneak aboard. I just had to wait for it. So I waited. And waited. I waited until I fell asleep, the snow falling all around me. G'day, a familiar Australian voice greeted me, waking me from my nap. All my breath puffed out of me at once, and I had to calm myself before turning to her. Shazza? Sharon tried to grin over her grimace. One of her eyes was closed, and it was caked in blood. I could see burn marks around her closed eye. This one, and only. I stood up and looked at her in horror. What happened to your eye? This, she waved at it dismissively, as if her eye were unimportant. Muzzle blast. Some dingbat shot his gun next to my eye during my grand escape. You should see the state of him now. Guilt started filling my chest. I take it Domina didn't help you. That Mafia broad, she scoffed. We crossed paths once. She had her own agenda. She's still there, keeping an eye on Santiago. I'm so glad you're out of there. Me too, she said, and winced at the pain. I looked at her bloodied eye. Was the injury permanent? Sharon, about your eye, I think you need a doctor. Don't be a dingo, come on. Let's go somewhere warmer, she said, and walked ahead of me. I glanced down at my wrist. Moti? Sharon's back. And you're still not talking to me? Moti didn't reply. I sighed. I saved €1,000,000. Sharon was alive and the Mafia was on Victor. I could handle the silent treatment from Moti. It wasn't the €1,000,000, it was the fact that we wouldn't be able to stop Victor if we saved her. As we walked away from the docks, I glanced back at Santiago's ferry several times. It was interesting that he'd chosen to deliver his second sacrifice from on board a ship, guarded by an icy sea. Even Santiago knew that Santiago couldn't last. I'd only just felt out the truth of Santiago's fate when the ferry turned and motored away. His most faithful paused to watch him go, and I wondered if they felt relieved or abandoned now that he declared them to be insufficiently faithful. I certainly hoped Domina would do more than keep an eye on Santiago. At that moment, and the enormous black screens lining the water lit up with Santiago's face once more. I have searched for the faithless one in our midst, and I have found her at last, he cried. If you see this false woman among you, capture her at once and bring her to me in Rome. She will be our last and greatest sacrifice. His image faded from the screen, replaced by a photo of Sharon. My heart skipped a beat as I tried to process what this new lie meant for my friend. We turned to look at each other for a moment. This way, Sharon whispered, and I followed. She led us to a large cathedral that looked like it was constructed at least 5 centuries ago. Once we were sure we were out of danger, Sharon stood next to me and examined the cathedral's signed Caravaggio painting with a critical air. I'd like it better if beheadings hadn't just become a possibility again, she said. Victor had been killing his victims by shooting them in the head, but I wasn't about to argue that point, so I didn't say anything. My first instinct is to go and slap that pig-headed lout right in the face, she sighed, but I've decided to be cautious and stick a little closer to you for a while. Time to stop Santiago once and for all. We're going to end this now. That's more like it, said Sharon. Domina and her mafia buddies are still on board. They're not going to lose them. Moti, I said, would you mind telling Domina that we want an update, but make sure her emoticon doesn't make any noise. Right away, teacher. Domina called back at once, but spoke in a whisper. He needs to live a little longer, she said. What? I said. You never asked me to kill him, she pointed out. You asked me to stop him. To get rid of him, I confirmed, by capture, drugging, whatever, not to join him for a cruise. If we kill him now, she said, we'll make him a martyr. Dozens more victorious leaders would spring up within the day, and it would be a lot harder to end things. If you're wrong, do I get a refund? Domina snorted softly and hung up. She managed to snort in such a way that I felt uncouth. Before we did anything else, I checked the morals of a tiny hair salon by making some pro-Santiago comments that got me thrown out. It's safe, I told Sharon happily. Surprise me. She grinned and left me to wait for her transformation. I watched the people walking by, doing their shopping and running errands. There were families, professionals and teenagers, many of them with new golden eyes. I played a grim game, imagining which of them would deliver Sharon to Santiago if they spotted her. That woman calling for her grandchild. That man smiling as he loosened his tie. That redhead with far too many bags of shopping. The redhead in sunglasses was coming closer, and I had a horrible feeling she was heading for the hair salon, and my daydream would become a reality. Instead, she stopped in front of me. G'day, she said. Are you faking it or what? Sharon, I gasped, and stood to my feet at once. But you're completely different. You're in a dress and heels and your hair. Sunglasses and makeup hid her eye injury well enough to not draw any attention. You really weren't faking it, she said. Not a bit. I'm a complete moron. Glad to hear it, she said, linking arms with mine. I thought the girly stuff was a nice touch, though I'm sure my ankles will hate me later. We headed back to the harbour and I did my best to act as relaxed as she did. I used to be so good at not caring about other people. What happened to me? So, said Sharon, surveying the array of ships in the harbour. Beg, borrow or steal? Oh, I still have a ship. I'll have Dolores send it here. From the moment Sharon started talking to our captain, it was clear we were in the company of pirates. Still, I trusted them more than I trusted Santiago. Which doesn't take much. The sea stunk of dying algae due to the lack of sunlight, and we had to take turns on watch with the crew, since far too many fish attacked the boat, as if we were personally to blame for their discomfort. I shot a dragonfish with wide, white staring eyes and uneven teeth. Sharon told me she'd shot dozens of sharks as they tried to bite into our hull over and over again. We were relieved to leave the sea behind and only deal with Rome's kamikaze pigeons and household pets behaving like apex predators, which with predictably unpleasant results, and of course all the cult members. The governments of France and Spain had already collapsed, and I doubted Italy would be far behind. Whatever happened to the government, I was very uncomfortable being on the streets. I felt like Sharon's face would be recognised at any moment. Some parts of Rome were hectic with an electric energy that could turn violent at any moment. Other parts were virtually deserted as citizens sensed coming disaster and fled elsewhere. Let's break into a deserted home. That sounds better. We found a street where every single mailbox was overflowing and chose a house with barred windows, so no convenient trees for invaders to hide behind. The only problem with choosing a house that gave us a clear view of anyone approaching was that we'd also be incredibly visible as we broke in. Even looking at it was suspicious, so we door-knocked on the empty houses one by one before pausing at the last house to discuss what we'd seen. 30 seconds for that kind of door lock, she said. Obviously it'd be less if we had the right tools. You think you can break into a house in 30, I said? She shrugged. I did bring a manicure kit just in case. She removed her sunglasses to get a better look at the lock. Sharon was still unable to open her injured eye, and it looked awful. I reminded myself that she was a grown-up, and it wasn't my place to nag her to see a doctor. It wasn't easy. I like you more every day. Thanks, she said. Shall we? Sharon got us inside in 22 seconds. I timed her. The house was lovely, even with all the curtains already drawn against the night. Finally, we could relax. I awoke hearing clear-headed after a quiet night. Clear-headed enough to know Domino had a point about the possibility of creating more villains by killing Santiago. It might take a while to find a clear phone line, but I was determined to talk to someone with a clearer perspective on the Victorious cult. Alright, we need to wrap this one up because we're out of time again. I don't know if we're any closer to the end. I have no idea how many acts there are. Maybe I'll look it up, because we've been at this for, what, 8 hours? I don't know. Feels like it. It's been a while. And it has been quite that we've been just about everywhere, every major place in the world. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for getting out for me, and I'll see you in the next one.